Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Before we start with our today's analysis, a quick gentle reminder. Byjus Exam Prep IAS has already launched its official Telegram channel. If you've not yet joined the channel, please do join so that you get all the current affairs related updates. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says, are data localization requirements necessary and proportionate? Let us try and understand what is this article all about. What is data? Data is the information given by all of us individuals to the government as well as the private agency. So data happens to be the new fuel in the information technology. We have one of the reports called as the digital economy report. The article makes a reference of the digital economy report. It can be important from the preliminary examination point of view. The report was formerly known as the information economy report. It monitors the trends and policies related to access, use and impact of digital technologies from a developmental perspective. This is published every other year. The report is prepared in close collaboration with external experts and organizations, including e-commerce associations, the ITC, ITU, UNICITRAL, UN Regional Commissions, UPU, World Information Technology and Services Alliance, WTO and World Bank. So this digital economy report goes on to say that businesses using the internet for the global trade have a higher survival rate than those who do not. So most of the companies operate on the internet, and only if they are operating on the internet they have a better survival rate. And when we speak about internet, what exactly happens? Our data is given to this particular company. Let's say for example we have Facebook. Facebook happens to be a company which is based from United States of America. If our data is given to Facebook and the information is saved in United States of America servers of Facebook, it means our data is getting exported. However, if Facebook has servers within India and our data is saved only within India, within the boundaries of India, such is what is called as data localization. So this article here is primarily looking at advantages of data localization. It is also looking at what could be the possible consequences if data localization is made into a law. First important factor that we have to look into is whenever there is no data localization, this can become a major problem to the democracy's operations. We know for the fact that democracy is one of the basic principle in the basic structure. However, when data is not localized, it can also influence the democracy. Let me give you an example of Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica was able to influence the election in Kenya. How? They made use of big data, behavioral micro-targeting, political campaign support, digital support, and this is how Cambridge Analytica identifies its activities in its Twitter profile. Let's say for example, you as a person, you're active on Twitter, or let's say for example, you're active on Facebook. So what do? You have your own political affiliations. You do share number of status as well. With this particular status that you have shared, they would be able to analyze and influence your thought process so that you are able to cast your vote in a particular direction. So if there is a political alignment that you have, they would be able to change it as well. Why? Because they know your preferences. So social media, that is data which is given to Facebook or Twitter, is shared with some other organization, that is Cambridge Analytica. So Facebook, without even taking your permission, or any other company without taking your permission, may actually give away your data. Sometimes they also take your permission as well, but you do not know that you are giving the permission for such and such practices. So your data is exported and ultimately they would be able to influence the outcome of democracy. If we take the example of Kenya, they come up with a campaign strategy based on the electorate's needs, jobs, fears, tribal violence, so on and so forth, and they were able to influence the outcome of democracy in Kenya. Similarly, they can also influence in any other country as well. This was also seen in United States of America as well. How is this happening? Through the data. So a company which is based out of United States of America is able to give the data to some other company, and that company, because it is based somewhere else, is also able to analyze the pattern. They are able to influence the outcome of the elections, which is why this company should not be allowed to give away data to some other country's servers. So if it is within that particular country's borders, this can be regulated much better is the first thing. So data localization is the need of the hour because we would be able to keep a check on such companies. The second advantage is when you consider European Union General Data Protection Regulation, this happens to be one of the data localization laws. What exactly happens? Let's say we have a company. The company will have to safeguard the data of all individuals within the European Union countries, and if it is exporting the data to some other country, how are you safeguarding the data within European Union? The same standards will also have to be followed in United States of America, or if you're basing this particular data to some other country, similar such safeguards and security will have to be provided to this part of the data. So basically, European Union's General Data Protection Regulation clearly depicts that the data or the information of that individual will have to be safeguarded. So data localization is important so that such information is not used for specific targeting. Russia has stricter laws pertaining to the cross-border flow of data and emphasize keeping data within the Russian Federation as well. The fourth advantage of data localization happens to be with respect to law enforcement. What exactly happens? Let's say for example, there are few terrorist organizations or individuals who are planning to conduct a terrorist activity. So in this particular case, they may also make use of Facebook as one of the platform, and they may start chatting as well, or they may send messages on FB as well. What if the Indian investigating agency want this particular message from Facebook? If it is within the boundaries of India, we would be able to get this information as soon as possible because the number of permissions that they have to take is comparatively less. But what if it is based outside India? So the time it takes to get the information may be comparatively far more. Let's say within India, we are able to take it within hours or within minutes, but if it is from some other country, because they are located in some other country, the managers may be in some other country, so taking permission may be comparatively more. So law enforcement and investigating agencies will have an advantage if it is data localized. And finally, it is also important from the monitoring point of view as well. Let's say for example, the Reserve Bank of India would be able to monitor it much better. So data localization has its own share of advantages. However, this article currently goes on to say with all these advantages, what it can also come up with is the disadvantages. What are the disadvantages? For instance, companies using the top level domain of Kazakhstan must function from physical servers located within the country. Malaysia requires consent for international transfer of data. Australia prevents the transfer of identifiable health records outside the country. A lot of countries prohibit transfer of data on the account of national interest, which is a very broad term and could encompass various situations. So there is no uniformity between different countries, and as a result, there is no uniform law as well. This ultimately means that for each country, designing laws of the internal policies of the company with the law of the country will become a complicated process. And if these companies have to bring in the servers, the cost of that particular server and the maintenance of the server will be comparatively more as well. As a result, companies will have to bear the brunt of extra charges. Whenever we speak about data security, the developed countries also have sophisticated tools as well. These sophisticated tools may not be present in the developing countries, and at the same time, they would be also able to achieve data security in their home country because they have the much advanced data security structure, but that may not be available in the developing countries. So looking into these aspects, we may have to reconsider this part as well. The third disadvantage is, let's say for example, we have a large company like Facebook. If it is entering into the mode of data localization, what will it do? It will basically come up with number of automation tools and techniques, and as a result, it may also lead to loss of jobs as well. If it is outside the country, they would be able to manage it better. There'll be enough employment opportunities that is generated. If it is localized, it may go ahead with the automation, and this may also lead to loss of employment. So in order to overcome all these issues, The author in this case proposes what is called as the localization approach, which is one of the method in the digital space wherein laws can be harmonized globally. Countries come together, they have uniform set of laws by paying attention to the local interest as well, which is what the author says as globalization. Added to it, we have something called as the cyber security. So when it comes to the cyber security, most of the countries are not able to prevent cyber issues, cyber warfare, so on and so forth. And when it comes to such issues, what we require is an understanding between all types of countries. Why? Because when it comes to cyber issues, we would not be able to prevent by one single country. Since we are already cooperating on the cyber warfare front, cyber issues front, why not come up and have a law which is equivalent to that of the cyber issues? Further, the government would be able to shift to many other modes like encryption rather than coming up with data localization. We know for the fact that privacy is very important, security of the country is very important, so why not introduce encryption rather than data localization is another aspect that the author is trying to give. So going forward, imposing restrictions in the free flow of data can only create an impact on the global economy, and this will also have a major hindrance on the local market as well. So it is time for us to rethink whether data localization is required or not, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says new regulations for awarding PhDs. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. We have the University Grants Commission, which has made sweeping changes in its latest regulations governing the award of PhDs. Basically, it has notified new regulations. One, in terms of the degree, introducing the new eligibility criteria, admission procedure, evaluation methods, so on and so forth for all those who are entering the PhD courses. What are the key changes that have been introduced? We have the UGC, which has notified University Grants Commission minimum standards and procedures for award of PhD degree regulations of 2022. First, what it speaks about is in reference to the eligibility. So a person can register after a 4-year or 8-semester bachelor's degree program. So if a person wants to do his PhD, he can join immediately after the 4-year or 8-semester course. So anyone with a 4-year or 8-semester bachelor's degree with a minimum of 75% in aggregate or its equivalent grade will be eligible for a PhD. A candidate can register after completing a 1-year or 2 semesters master's degree program. So those joining PhD programs after a 4-year UG program can do so after a 1-year master's degree. A 2-year or 4-semester master's degree program after a 3 years bachelor degree program with at least 55% marks or its equivalent grade. So graduates with conventional 3-year UG degrees need to have completed 2 years master degree. The second it focuses is on the MPhil. The new rules have discontinued the MPhil program altogether. However, that will have no bearing on those who are holding or pursuing MPhil degrees currently. But there are concerns with respect to this particular proposal made by the UGC. What is the concern? When it comes to the bachelor's and the master's degree in our country, it is basically designed in a way where students do not get much of activity with respect to the research. They will not do much of research when it comes to the bachelor's as well as the master's. But during the MPhil program, there is ample amount of space and ambit that is given to them where they would be able to engage in full-fledged research. Ultimately, when they go on to do PhD, they will have far more exposure as well. Now that the MPhil is removed, when they go up to the PhD, they will not have much of exposure with respect to the research, and many people may also suffer as well. So one of the concerns for removing MPhil basically means that MPhil degree was giving them the research exposure which was not given in the bachelor and the masters, but now since this is removed, once they step into the PhD mode, initially they will have a lot of issues with respect to the research. The third is in reference to the admissions. As was the norm so far, universities and colleges will be free to admit students through the NET GRF qualification route as well as the entrance exams at the level of the institutions. The entrance exam shall consist of 50% of research methodology and 50% shall be subject specific the regulation says. One of the notable changes introduced by UGC is with respect to evaluation and assessment criteria for the award of the degree, where it has waived the need to mandatorily publish a research paper in a peer-reviewed journal. So according to the earlier norms, if a person has to get a PhD, he has to do a research, and this research had to be published in one of the peer-reviewed journals. But then there was a problem with it, that many people had to pay for it, and some of the poor students were not able to pay for publishing their research papers on the journal, which is why we have the UGC, which has removed this criteria that was present earlier. The UGC now also offers part-time PhDs, a practice that was disallowed under the 2009 and the 2016 regulations. However, if a person has to get a part-time PhD, there has to be no objection certification or NOC, which has to be issued by the employer, apart from stating that the prospective part-time candidate employee is permitted to pursue studies on a part-time basis. The NOC will also have to spell out that they'll be given sufficient time for the research work as well. So they require the NOC certification from the employer, and at the same time they also have to promise that if so required, whenever that particular student goes on a part-time research, this person will be given ample amount of time for the research purposes. This should be given, and only then the college will allow it. What are the advantages of this notification? Basically, important changes such as abolishing of the MPhils will now relax the coursework for obtaining PhDs and allowing candidates to register for a PhD after finishing 4 years of graduation program. So this basically means that the impediments for inclusivity in the higher education is completely eliminated. But there are some concerns with respect to these regulations as well. What? One, we have a person who's completed his bachelor's degree who would now be able to pursue his PhD. However, this person who's completed his bachelor degree will have no exposure to the research and development. So academics say that these students will have no research experience and will be lost in the first few years of the PhD studies. The bachelor's course introduces the student to a subject, master's offers a specialization, and MPhil degree gives them an interim training to the conduct research. But now, since the MPhil is removed, this will again be a problematic area. There are also concerns about scholarship as well, fellowships to support PhD as well, and now with the severe shortage of the teachers impacting the number of research supervisors, will scholarship be provided to PhD students or not, is another area that we have to look at. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, why has France ended its military operations in Sahel? Let us try and understand what is this article all about. We have the French President Emmanuel Macron, who has announced the end of the decade-long Operation Berkane in Africa. Let us try and understand what is this Operation Berkane. When we go back to the year 2013, France began its military operation in Sahel in 2013. Titled as Operation Serval, it was limited to targeting extremists linked to the Al-Qaeda who took control of northern Mali. However, in 2014, the mission was also scaled up, renamed as Operation Berkane, and was aimed at counter-terrorism. So there were two objectives here. One, it initially entered into Mali and they wanted to make sure that all the terrorists are eliminated. That was one of the objective, and at the same time, they also wanted to make sure that counter-terrorism strategy is present in this place of Sahel region. The objective was to assist local armed forces to prevent the resurgence of non-state armed groups across the Sahel region. Around 4,500 French personnel were deployed with the local joint counter-terrorism force. So this means that France had to achieve two objectives. One was to liberate Mali from the insurgency in the northern part, and at the same time it also had to come up with counter-terrorism operations in West Africa, including the neutralization of the key terrorist. Was it successful in doing it? There were its own share of successes as well as the failures. What have been the success of France in in Africa. In its major successes, France regains Mali's northern regions from the extremists in 2014 through Operation Serval. In 2020, Abdel Malik Daukal and Daga Moussa, key leaders of Al Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb and Al Qaeda affiliate groups, were killed in the French led operations. These are the advantages. This was a success that France saw in Africa, but there were its own share of failures as well. First, the region, despite the operation, witnessed the growth of new groups affiliated to terrorist organizations, including the Islamic State. While they were able to eliminate few forces, new groups started immediately popping up. They were not able to control it. Second, the failure of the operation led to a humanitarian crisis. Large number of people started passing away as well. There were conflicts between the groups as well. This ultimately led to grave humanitarian crisis. According to Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, the violence had claimed 5,450 lives across Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger in just the first half of 2022. Further, the Africa Center for Strategic Studies recorded 2005 incidents of violence in the Sahel in 2021 compared to 1,180 incidents in the previous year. Third, Operation Berkane's unfilled objective to resolve the region's insurgency sparked an increase in the civilian support to the military and has contributed to the subsequent political uncertainties in the Sahel. So, who will be occupying the political position? What will be the governance approach is yet not present in these parts of Africa. So, why did Macron pull out of Africa? That is because France's relationship with the military rulers grew hostile after a series of coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. Because he did not have good cooperation with the military rulers, he had to pull out the French forces from these countries. Secondly, since Operation Berkane was widely perceived as a failure, anti-French sentiments and questions over the French intentions flared up with a further demand for France withdrawal from the region. So this basically meant that people who were initially supporting France were actually against the French government right now and its soldiers. So there was anti-French sentiments in this part of Africa. Finally, France and other African countries claim that Wagner Group, a private military company close to Kremlin, is playing a major role in fueling the insurgency and discrediting the French withdrawal. All this means that the French forces had to be pulled out of Africa. What will be the future course of action? Since France is withdrawing its forces from Africa, it has to redraw its priorities, restructure its policies in the Africa so that it remains one of the key partners with the African countries. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says saving the precious. The article here is speaking about the groundwater consumption. We have the Ministry of Water Resources which has given a report. This report gives us the amount of groundwater that India has, how much of groundwater we are extracting. So on the surface level, the total annual groundwater recharge defined as the groundwater stored for the entire country is 437.60 billion cubic meters, out of which the quantity extracted was 239.16 PCM. A similar assessment in 2020 found that annual groundwater recharge was 436 BCM and extraction was 245 BCM. In 2017, recharge was 432 BCM and extraction was 249 BCM. The 2022 assessment suggests that groundwater extraction is lowest since 2004 when it comes to 231 BCM. So this means that there is increasing groundwater that is present in the country, but the extraction that people are making is comparatively less. So we have sustainable amount of groundwater, says this article. However, the article also points out the methodology that they have used both at the central level and also at the state level for concluding these numbers may not be right. So these numbers do not point the right picture, says the article. Added to it, when we speak about groundwater extraction, there is no central law governing the use of groundwater and various state governments have their own set of laws. Since we do not have a uniform set of laws, Once again, the numbers may not point the right picture, says the author. In order to overcome these issues of groundwater extraction, what does the article suggest? It suggests, as of now, there is fresh water that is also being used for the industrial purposes. So the fresh water that is extracted from the groundwater is used for the industrial purposes. So such fresh water should not be used for the industrial purposes, but instead used water should be recycled and such should be sent to the industries is the first major recommendation. As of now, water is used as a private resource. Let's say, for example, if you are able to dig the borewell in your houses, you would be able to extract the water. Such should not be. Water should be treated as a public resource, and ultimately law governing such things should also be implemented. As a result, the author goes on to say that going forward, what we will witness is the water crisis. In order to overcome the water crisis, a central law and treating the water as a public resource will have to be implemented, says this article. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says a sense of an ending. The article here is speaking about those individuals who were involved in the Rajiv Gandhi assassination case. Out of these, 7 people were convicted. Out of the 7, 3 were imposed with death penalty and 4 were given the life sentence. The Supreme Court commuted the death sentences to life imprisonment back in the year 2014. So there was a lot of sympathy towards these people, and ultimately a resolution was adopted by the Tamil Nadu cabinet in 2018 for releasing them under Article 161 of the Indian Constitution, and which was referred to the governor. The governor did not act upon it for a longer time, and ultimately he refers it to the central government. The central government did not act as well, and this goes to the court of law, and the Supreme Court did not find any constitutional basis for the governor's action and invoked its extraordinary powers to order the release of A.G. Perari Valan. The same benefit has now been extended to others. So this article goes on to point out that under 161, the governor has the powers, that is the pardon powers. These powers indirectly means it is the cabinet who go on to recommend. So if the cabinet has recommended to the governor has to simply give his assent to it, and ultimately these people will be released from the prisons. But what did the governor do? The governor referred this particular bill to the central government, that is to the president, and as a result the president did not sign as well, because it is the central government which has to give permission to it, and they were keeping it for a longer period of time. So the state government approaches the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court now says if the cabinet so decides, the governor has to give assent to it. So the Supreme Court has released these convicts, saying that once it is approved by the state government, the governor need not had to refer such a bill to the president. What we have to remember is that when it comes to Article 163, it is the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. The governor has to give consent to it in extraordinary circumstances. Only then he can refer to the president. But in this particular case, there was no need to refer this bill to the president, and the Supreme Court has released all these convicts. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Will data localization requirement be a barrier to digital trade? Critically examine. Write a note on University Grants Commission, minimum standards and procedures for award of PhD degree regulations of 2022. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.